My name is Jess Miller. I'm 32 years old and I'm an architectural designer in Chicago. 3 weeks ago, my mother stood at my brother's rehearsal dinner, ready to announce to 50 guests that I was no longer part of our family. My crime? Refusing to pay $75,000 for a wedding I was supposed to feel grateful to even attend. But that's not the real story. The real story started 15 years earlier on a rainy night when I was just 17, and a car accident changed everything. My brother in the hospital, and a guilt so heavy I've carried it every single day since, until I discovered the lie they'd been hiding from me all along. I've spent half my life believing I single-handedly destroyed my brother Ryan's future. My mother made sure I never forgot it. My father's silence was his agreement. And Ryan's scars were the evidence I could never argue with. So when my mother called 3 weeks before the wedding and made her demand, something inside me finally broke. Not with anger but with a quiet, terrifying crack. The call came on a Tuesday night. I was sketching a new building design when her name lit up my phone. I took a breath before answering. Our conversations were always a minefield. Jessica. Her voice was crisp, all business. We need to talk about Ryan's wedding. Of course, I said, my pencil hovering over the paper. I'm so excited for them. It's going to be expensive, she cut in, ignoring my enthusiasm. Your father and I are doing everything we can, but Ryan deserves the best, especially after everything he's been through. There was the familiar weight settling in my chest. Mom, I already sent a very generous gift and I'm covering my own travel and hotel. $75,000. I blinked. What? We need you to contribute $75,000 toward the expenses. Her tone was matter-of-fact, as if she were asking me to pass the salt. It's the absolute least you can do, Jessica. After everything you took from him. His athletic scholarship, his health, 2 years of his life in physical therapy because of your carelessness. My throat tightened. Mom, I've helped out for years. The down payment on your house, Dad's surgery. That was your obligation. Her words were like ice. Not generosity. This is different. This is about Ryan. It's about finally making things right. I don't have that kind of money just sitting around, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You're a successful architect in Chicago. Don't pretend you can't afford it. She paused, letting the silence hang. $75,000, Jessica. Or don't even bother coming to the wedding. The line went dead. I just sat there, phone in my hand, feeling 17 all over again. Powerless, suffocated by a guilt that had defined my entire adult life. That night, sleeping was impossible. My mother's ultimatum echoed in the dark, pulling me back to the night that had become the foundation of my family's story about me. I was 17, a senior with a stack of college acceptance letters. Ryan was 12, a soccer prodigy with boundless energy. I'd picked him up from practice because Mom and Dad were at a dinner party. It was raining hard, the kind of downpour that slicks the roads into black mirrors. The drive home included a steep, winding road down a large hill I'd driven 100 times. I was going the speed limit, being careful. Halfway down I pressed the brake. Nothing happened. I pressed harder, my heart starting to pound. The pedal went straight to the floor. The car was picking up speed, accelerating down the wet slope. Jess. Ryan's voice was small, scared. It's okay, I said, but panic was clawing at my throat. I pumped the useless brakes. I yanked the emergency brake. The car fishtailed and I lost all control. The world became a blur of spinning trees and headlights, ending with the sickening crunch of metal against a utility pole. Airbags exploded. Ryan screamed. Then silence except for the hiss of the engine and the relentless drumming of rain on the roof. In the flashing lights of the ambulance, I remember a police officer talking to my dad, mentioning something about obvious mechanical failure, but the words were a fog. I was in shock, my focus only on Ryan being loaded onto a stretcher, his leg twisted at an awful angle. What I remember with perfect, searing clarity is my mother in the sterile hospital hallway. She wouldn't even look at me. She just turned to my father, her voice shaking with a cold fury, and said, she was going too fast. She wasn't paying attention. And in that moment I believed her. I swallowed her version of the truth whole and it became my own. For the next 15 years I let it poison everything. The text started the next morning. A single message from my mother. Have you made the wire transfer yet? I ignored it, my stomach churning. By the afternoon another one arrived. Ryan is counting on you. Don't let him down again. The word again felt like a physical blow. I was in a client meeting when my phone buzzed with the third message. Your father is so very disappointed in you. That evening I finally caved and responded. Mom, I need more time to think about this. Her reply was instant. There's nothing to think about. You owe us. That was the beginning of the siege. The messages were a daily torture. Don't embarrass this family, Jessica. This is about loyalty. Or doesn't that matter to you anymore? I tried to reason with her, listing my contributions over the years. The $15,000 for Dad's surgery insurance wouldn't cover. The 6 months of their mortgage I paid when he was laid off. That was separate, she texted back instantly. This is about Ryan. This is about what you did to him. Every reply twisted the knife a little deeper. I started dreading the sound of my phone. Each notification was another drop of poison, feeding the guilt that had been my constant companion since I was a teenager. Then I decided to call the one person I thought might be on my side. Ryan. He answered on the third ring, slightly out of breath. Jess, hey. What's up? Ryan, I need to ask you something, I said, pacing my apartment. And I need you to be completely honest with me. Do you really want me to pay $75,000 for your wedding? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Jess, he finally said, his voice cautious. I didn't ask for that. Mom just thinks it's fair. Fair. The word caught in my throat. Ryan, you're doing great. You have an amazing career, you're marrying Madison. What did you really lose that night? I lost 2 years to rehab, Jess. His voice was quiet but firm, and I could hear my mother's coaching in every syllable. I lost my scholarship. I dealt with a lot of pain. But the insurance covered the medical bills. And you got a better academic scholarship a year later. You graduated with honors. That's not the point, he said, getting frustrated. Then what is the point? I pressed, my voice shaking. Because it feels like I've spent 15 years apologizing for an accident. I've given Mom and Dad thousands of dollars. And now I'm supposed to drain my savings to prove I'm still sorry? You're not draining your savings. You're a successful architect. That's what Mom said. My heart sank. He was just a mouthpiece. He wasn't even thinking for himself. Look, he sighed, I don't want to fight about this. Mom says you owe us. I don't know all the details about money and insurance from back then. I just know my life changed that night. Mine too, I whispered. I don't want drama at my wedding, Jess. Please, just do what Mom asks. For me. He hung up before I could answer. I stood there, phone in hand, hit with a devastating realization. Ryan wasn't my enemy, but he wasn't my ally either. He was a pawn, and I was completely, utterly alone. Reeling from Ryan's phone call, I met my best friend Victoria at a cafe. Victoria's a social worker, and she's heard every story of family dysfunction imaginable. If anyone could give me a sane perspective, it was her. I laid it all out. The accident, the 15 years of relentless guilt, my mother's $75,000 demand, the text messages, the threats, and the heartbreaking conversation with my brother. She listened patiently, her hands wrapped around her coffee mug, not interrupting once. When I finally finished, the whole ugly story hanging in the air between us, she was quiet for a long moment. Jess, she said finally, her voice calm and firm. This is financial abuse. And what your mother is doing is emotional blackmail. I just stared at her. Those are really strong words, Vic. They're the accurate words, she said, leaning forward. Your mother is using manufactured guilt and the threat of public shame to extort a huge amount of money from you. That isn't a family disagreement. That's a classic abuse tactic. The clinical, professional terms hung in the air, reframing everything. But what if I'm wrong? The question tumbled out, a whisper of the doubt that had haunted me for years. What if I really did ruin his life? What if I owe them? Did you? Victoria's gaze was steady and unflinching. Did you really ruin his life? Or is that just the story they told you so many times that you started to believe it was true? I opened my mouth to defend my guilt, to list all the reasons I was to blame, but the words wouldn't come. For the first time, I didn't have an answer. Jess, I want you to do something, she said, pulling out her phone. I want you to get the official police report from that accident. Not what your parents told you happened. Not what you remember through the haze of trauma and shock. I want you to get the objective, undisputed facts. It was 15 years ago, I said, shaking my head. Police reports are public record. You're an architect. You know how to find municipal documents. You can request a copy. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her grip firm and grounding. Get the facts, Jess. Then you can decide what you owe. But please stop carrying the weight of a crime you might not have even committed. I drove home with her words echoing in my head. The facts. When was the last time I had ever considered the actual facts instead of just the story I'd been fed? That night, I found the number for the county records office. I had 1 week until the rehearsal dinner. The county records office was a drab brick building about 20 minutes from my parents' house. I took a half-day off work, telling my team I had a personal matter to attend to. The clerk behind the counter looked profoundly bored. How can I help you? She asked without looking up. I need a copy of a police report from 15 years ago, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. A single vehicle accident. I gave her the date and the name of the road. She typed slowly, the clicking of the keyboard echoing in the quiet room. Name. Jessica Miller. I was the driver. More typing. The clock on the wall seemed to be ticking in slow motion. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Found it, she said flatly. That'll be $20 for the certified copy. My hand trembled as I gave her my credit card. She disappeared into a back room, and the 5 minutes she was gone felt like an eternity. She returned and handed me a thick manila envelope. I walked to my car like a robot, the envelope feeling like it was burning a hole in my hand. I sat in the driver's seat just staring at it. This was it. The truth I had been too terrified to look for. The facts. I almost started the car and drove away, content to live with the story I knew. But Victoria's voice was in my head. Get the facts. I tore open the seal. The report was 4 pages long, filled with official jargon. I skipped past the basic information. Date, time, weather conditions. My eyes scanning for the section labeled, Investigator's Narrative and Conclusion. The words swam before my eyes, then sharpened into focus. Cause of accident determined to be catastrophic brake failure due to a manufacturing defect in the primary brake line assembly. Vehicle inspection revealed complete loss of brake fluid from a defective hydraulic connection. Driver not at fault. No citations issued. I read it again. And a third time. Driver not at fault. Manufacturing defect. It wasn't my fault. It was never my fault. For 15 years I had carried this crushing weight. 15 years of apologies, of financial penance, of believing I was fundamentally broken because of one horrible night. And it was all a lie. My hands were shaking so violently I dropped the papers. But as I gathered them, another line caught my eye. Vehicle was towed and held as evidence in a pending class action lawsuit against the auto manufacturer. A class action lawsuit. My blood ran cold. They didn't just know I was innocent. They sued. They must have gotten a settlement. Hiding that truth while extorting money from me wasn't just cruel. It was criminal. The rehearsal dinner was at an upscale restaurant with panoramic city views. 50 guests filled the private room. Ryan's friends, Madison's family, and our own relatives. I arrived on time wearing a simple black dress, carrying a small clutch. Inside that clutch was the police report. The room was buzzing with happy conversation. A celebration. Ryan saw me first and crossed the room to give me a hug. You came, he said, relief washing over his face. Of course I came. You're my brother, I replied. My mother, Kimberly, swept through the room in a sharp, tailored suit, a smile plastered on her face that never reached her eyes. When she saw me, the smile tightened. Jessica, you're here. I wouldn't miss it. We'll see about that, she murmured before moving on. I found my seat at a table near the back, a clear message. After dessert, my mother moved to the front of the room and tapped the microphone. The room quieted. Good evening, everyone, she began, her voice smooth as silk. Thank you all for being here to celebrate Ryan and Madison. She launched into a polished speech about Ryan's determination and his success despite facing significant challenges. As many of you know, she continued, her eyes scanning the room, Ryan's life was altered by a serious car accident when he was just 12 years old. He lost opportunities. He spent 2 years in grueling physical therapy. My stomach twisted into a knot. He was actually doing it. But look at him now, she said, beaming. The room applauded. Ryan looked down at his plate, uncomfortable. Then her gaze landed directly on me. And tonight I want to acknowledge my daughter, Jessica. 50 pairs of eyes swiveled in my direction. Jessica has done very well for herself. A successful architect. And we've been discussing how she might show her support for the brother whose life was so impacted by her actions. The room was dead silent. Jessica, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. You and I spoke about a financial contribution to help with this beautiful wedding. Have you made that transfer? This was it. The public execution she had promised. Everyone was staring, waiting. I rose slowly from my chair. Mom, I said, my voice steady, I think this is a private conversation. Nonsense, she smiled, a predator's smile. Everyone here is family. They deserve to know where your priorities are. My hands were cold, but my voice was calm. My priority has always been this family. I paid for Dad's surgery. I helped with the mortgage. That was your obligation, she cut in smoothly. This is about making things right. I don't owe you $75,000. A collective gasp went through the room. Whispers erupted. My mother's expression hardened. After what you did. You don't think you owe him? What I did? I asked, letting the question hang in the air. Mom, let's talk about what really happened that night. Everyone knows what happened. You were careless. You were reckless. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just looked her straight in the eye and asked one simple question. Mom, why did you never tell me about the class action lawsuit? About the settlement you and Dad received from the car company after the accident? The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened but no sound came out. That frozen, horrified silence was the only confession anyone in that room needed. The power didn't just shift. Shattered. In the chaotic aftermath, as my mother stood there, speechless and exposed, my brother Ryan and his fiancée Madison rushed to my side. Jess, is that true? Ryan asked, his eyes wide with disbelief and horror. I just nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He turned to our mother, his voice cracking. All this time, you let her believe it was her fault. My father, who had been silent and invisible all night, finally spoke. It was complicated, son. Complicated? My Uncle Kevin boomed from his table. David, that's not complicated, that's just wrong. The room erupted in hushed, furious conversations. My mother's carefully crafted image as the matriarch, the long-suffering mother of a victim, was destroyed in a single moment. She had been publicly shamed not by me but by her own lie. In the months that followed, things changed. I didn't have to cut my family off. The truth did it for me, severing the toxic bonds and leaving space to build something real. My relationship with Ryan and Madison blossomed. We really talked for the first time in 15 years without the shadow of guilt between us. My father, full of remorse, started going to therapy. He began to understand his role in the family dynamic, and we slowly, cautiously started to rebuild our own relationship. He explained it to me once using a phrase his therapist had taught him. He called it the scapegoat enabler narcissist triangle. My mother, he said, was the narcissist at the center, unable to accept any fault and needing to control the narrative. He was the enabler, the one who kept the peace by going along with her story, avoiding conflict at all costs. And I was the scapegoat. The one designated to carry all the family's blame, all the shame, so that the system could remain intact. Hearing it laid out like that was freeing. It wasn't just about a car accident anymore. It was about a dysfunctional pattern that had been controlling my life. My mother never apologized. We barely speak now. Her social standing in the family is fractured, and she has to live with the consequences of her choices. But I realized I don't need her apology to be whole. I found my own peace. I'm no longer the guilty daughter, the sister with a debt to pay. I'm just Jess. An architect, a sister, a daughter, building a new foundation for my life, one based not on lies and obligation but on truth, boundaries, and genuine love. My life is finally my own design.